Dust stung his bare feet, the boy's arms trembling around a silent newborn as the auctioneer's gavel fell. Lot 7, Orphan and Infant, free to good home, echoed across Dusthollow's sun-baked dirt. Isaiah Ike Walker stood on the splintered block, cradling his sister wrapped in a patched feed sack blanket. The cloth bore his mother's initials, E.W., stitched in faded red. A tarnished copper locket, his last link to her, hung at his throat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. The crowd pressing on three sides, dusty boots, sun-bleached spurs, cold eyes weighing lifetime's worth. Ike stared at his sister's downy head, tears drying on dirt-smudged cheeks. The auctioneer's voice rattled like wind-scarred timbers. Any bids? Silence answered. He wrapped the blanket tighter, knuckles white on soft wool. Lily's small hand curled around his finger, each breath a silent plea. Two townsfolk shifted at the edge. Mrs. Caldwell, the preacher's wife, her shawl grave gray, and old Jeb Calloway, squinting against the sun. But no hand rose to claim them. Abel Thorne guided his mare through Dusthollow's narrow street, coat-tails flaring in wind that carried grief's echo. He paused at the auction block, eyes hidden beneath worn hat brim. Years ago, fever stole his wife and emptied his cradle of laughter. Since then, the prairie had been his only companion. He watched the boy's trembling form, heart twisting beneath cottonwood scars. The auctioneer banged his gavel again. Going once, Ike flinched, clutching Lily closer. Abel felt a tug, something that pulsed in emptiness where hope should be. He dismounted, boots crunching the parched earth. No one met his gaze as he climbed the rotten steps beside Ike. Ike looked up at the stranger's kind face, jaw softened by sorrow's echo. Abel lifted his stiff hands and reached for the blanket's fringe. "I'll take them," he said, voice low as canyon dusk. The gavel fell in muted triumph. Ike's sister stirred, her lashes brushing his cheek like memory of mother's kiss. The crowd parted. Mrs. Caldwell nodded once, pity and relief mingling in her eyes. Jeb grunted approval. Abel paid in rough coins, pennies and nickels, each a silent pledge. He wrapped Lily in the blanket and slid the locket free. Ike pressed it into Abel's palm. He recognized the initials in fading brass, E.W. The man's chin quivered. He slipped the locket into his coat. Abel led them out of Dusthollow, the sun falling across sagebrush plains. Ike clung to Lily's blanket, her fragile warmth of promise in the dusk. They crossed a low wooden bridge spanning Bitter Creek, its boards groaning beneath the mare's hoofs. A lone rider watched on the hilltop, a dark silhouette with spurs that glinted like threats. Ike shivered beneath twilight's hush. At Abel's homestead, a pine-fenced yard lay silent beneath frost's first breath. The cabin's logs glowed faint amber where lanterns flickered behind shuttered windows. Abel guided Ike to the porch and lifted Lily from the blanket. She cooed once, and Ike's stomach clenched with relief. Abel set them inside, closing the door against wind's howl. Clara Bright, Abel's late wife, had woven that blanket by hearthlight, each stitch a prayer for family's future. Abel spread it on a straw pile beside the hearth. He placed Lily there, then knelt to lift Ike's bruised feet to warming embers. He rubbed dirt from the boy's ankles and offered a tin cup of warm water. Ike sipped, eyes bright when he met Abel's, question and gratitude bound in silence. Abel pressed his hand to his chest. Ike nodded. No words were needed. Trust had found them in that shared hush. Night settled around the cabin like a protective cloak. Abel stoked the embers to crackling flame and fetched oil from a shelf. Wisps of dried sage and pine drifted through lantern light. He draped the blanket over Lily's crib, a rough cradle built from wagon spokes, and tucked its edge around Ike's shoulders. The boy's hand drifted to his mother's locket pinned at his throat. Abel smiled, grief softening in embers' glow. Beyond the window, wind whispered through pines, carrying hoofbeats that slowed and faded. The mare stamped in the corral, boots hollow on snow dust and sage. Ike peered into the dark, heart fluttering at unseen watchers. Abel placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, a silent vow. No harm would come under his roof. As Ike drifted toward sleep, he pressed the blanket's fringe to his cheek, each rough stitch a tether to this new life. Abel watched from a heart's shadow, coat dusted in Dusthallow's defeat and hope's first ember. He retrieved a locket from his pocket and whispered Clara's name, promise and memory entwined in brass and hair. Outside, a lone rider paused at the fence line, black coat flaring beneath moonlight. He raised a hand, nodding once before melting into night's grasp. Justice and peril rode the same paths in Wyoming's wild heart. Dawn would bring reckoning and redemption in equal measure. Before sleep claimed them, Ike glimpsed hoof prints press around a cabin, fresh and deliberate. He wrapped the blanket tighter, heart racing beneath opaque fear. In the hush before dawn, the valley held its breath for the stranger's return, and the secret woven in his mother's locket. Hoof prints lingered in dawn's frost, a stranger's threat circling Abel's fragile homestead. Dusthollow's winter chill bit at the pine fence yard as Isaiah, Ike, Walker, and his sister Lily huddled beneath their blanket crib beside the cabin's rough-hewn door. Abel Thorne stepped from the cabin, cold at his hip, and surveyed the frozen prints curving toward the corral gate, sign that danger had not slept. Ike rose from the straw pallet, fingers curled around his mother's blanket. E.W. stitched in red on frayed wool. He tucked Lily closer and followed Abel to the creek, pines bowing beneath heavy frost. Abel knelt at the water's edge and dipped the tin canteen into ice-steaming flow. Ike leaned forward, coat dragging dew-soaked grass, and watched water swirl over stones. When Abel handed him the canteen, Ike's knuckles whitened around its rim. He lifted a sip to Lily's lips, each drop a promise of safety in this new life. The wind whispered through sagebrush, carrying echoes of Dusthollow's auction block and the sun-bleached faces that passed them by. Ike pressed a locket at his throat, cupric brass etched with Elizabeth Walker's name, and slipped it beneath his shirt. Each heartbeat rattled like hoofbeats on frozen earth. Back at the cabin, Abel guided Ike to the woodpile. He handed Ike an axe, blunt and heavy for small hands. Ike planted his feet on pine needle floor and swung with deliberate care, splitting logs into kindling. Lily cooed in her blanket crib as Abel stacked the wood beside the hearth. Firelight glowed on Abel's grief-lined face, a mirror of loss and resolve. He tossed a flake of bark onto the embers. Flames flared, smoke curling like prayer. Ike watched the blaze reflect in Lily's wide eyes, heart softening beneath memory's ash. Later, Abel crouched by the corral fence, mending splintered rails with rawhide lashings. Ike joined him, hammering nails set in battered wood. Each tap rang like a vow to protect this place and its new family. Abel paused and rested his hand on Ike's shoulder. No words passed. Trust was forged in shared labor in the forest hush. From the lane, Mrs. Caldwell approached in traveling shawl, crate of pemmican under her arm. Her face was stern comfort. "Jeb spotted Graves' men near the old mill," she said, voice low. "They scour the flats for your claim's worth. Keep watch." She pressed a small sack into Abel's hand, flour and salt pork bound in oil canvas. Then she blinked tears into dusk and turned homeward. I clutched the sack chest tight. Lily snuggled into her blanket's folds. Ike fingered the locket's edge, its brass cool beneath his palm. That evening, Abel lit lanterns and set stew to simmer in cast iron. He ladled bowls of pemmican and turnip for Ike. Lily's bowl held soft porridge. Ike held the locket in one hand and spoon in the other, each mouthful a step toward healing. Abel watched the boy's resilience, a flicker of family reborn beneath frontier sky. After supper, Ike retrieved the locket and pried it open. Inside, along with his mother's faded photograph, was a folded scrap of parchment, half a hand-drawn map, showing the Walker claim's boundary and a vein marked silver, the very mine that collapsed in Dusthollow. Ike's breath caught. His mother's lands were rich beneath winter's hush. Greed's motive was clear now. Abel placed a steadying hand on Ike's back. "We'll guard what's right," he said. Ike nodded, pressing the map tight against his chest. Night fell and lanterns glow. Abel swept ashes from the hearth and fetched the journal Ike had begun. He opened to the entry, "My land is mine." Ike's scrawl trailed beneath, ink smudged by tears. Abel turned the journal's pages, finding his own note, "Clara's lullaby, my heart's echo." He closed the book and pressed it against his heart. Shared stories bound in leather. Outside, wind rattled the cabin's corner. Abel fetched his Winchester and stood by the doorway, eyes scanning moonlit rail and pines. Ike placed Lily's blanket over the crib, each flap of wool a silent shield. He pressed the locket's map to his lips and whispered his mother's name into the night. Before sleep claimed them, a soft rap shook the shutters. Abel opened the door to Jeb Calloway, squinting beneath lantern's glare. "This came for you," Jeb said, handing Abel a folded note penned in spidery script. "Pay your dues or lose the claim. Graves." His voice trembled with warning. "They'll be back." Abel read the note by lantern's flicker, demand for payment of ominously steep debt. Clearly no ledger's writ. He refolded the paper and tucked it into his coat. Jeb's gaze softened at the sight of Ike and Lily. "You're doing right by them," he said. "Dusthollow's been silent, judgment shifting. But Graves' money buys men." He tapped his hat and departed into winter's hush. Inside, Abel closed the door and bolted it against dark. He set the note on the mantel beside the locket and map. Ike pressed his hand to Abel's arm. Unspoken fear and determination. Abel knelt and lifted Ike's chin. "They won't take you," he promised. Ike nodded, eyes shining with trust. He reached into his pocket and produced a small silver key, his mother's gift. "This opens my home," he said, voice steady. "Our home." Abel took the key and placed it in his palm. He met Ike's gaze, grief and purpose entwined. "Then we'll lock it tight," Abel said. He wrapped the locket around his wrist and clapped a hand to Ike's shoulder. Lily stirred on her pallet, innocent hope breathing in sleep's hush. As wind scoured sagebrush and moonlight skittered across snow-dusted rails, the cabin exhaled its shelter. Lanterns glowed like lanterns of mercy. The hearth's embers pulsed with promise. Ike and Lily slept beneath the blanket's watch. Abel stood sentinel by the door, colt in hand, heart anchored by loss and love's fragile bloom. Outside, hoof prints etched deeper in frozen earth. Graves' men returning. Come dawn's pale promise. In the hush before winter's dawn, the homestead held its breath. A stand awaited, and only shared courage and memory's guide could carry them through Dusthollow's final reckoning. Hoof prints carved the frost. Graves' shadow creeping closer to Abel's fragile stand. Snow-dusted pines loomed over the pine fence corral as Abel tightened shutters against the west wind. Ike A. Walker, locket clutched in one small fist, pressed Lily's blanket-wrapped form close. Each board he nailed across the window was a pulse beat against peril's approach. Abel Thorne knelt by the cabin's door, hammer resting on his thigh. 2 years passed. Fever stole his Clara and their daughter. Each lost a ghost in every empty room. Now he defended new life, a boy and his newborn sister bound by grief and hope. He rose and stomped snow from his boots, then checked the Winchester hanging by the hearth. The lock clicked true, the barrel clear. He laid the rifle across the bunk's edge, silent vow to stand guard. Ike A. watched Abel's broad shoulders tense and relax. He fingered his mother's locket. Inside, along with her faded smile, a penciled name, Marston. His eyes darted to the journal on the table, pages open to his father's sermon. It spoke of land as legacy. He closed the journal and set on the shelf, each thought a prayer against Graves' greed. Morning light found the pair at chores. Abel guiding Lily's pale cheek to the sunlit trough, Ike scattering feed for the starveling horses. Frost-crusted corral boards glinted in dawn's glow as the animals nickered in grateful clamor. Ike's small hand trembled with purpose. He nudged the stall door close and glimpsed a distant figure on the ridge. Watcher or threat, he could not tell. He swallowed and kept his back to the herd, heart thundering like far-off hooves. Abel reined in the mare and led it to the barn, each step echoing Loss's hollow corridor. He paused at the tack rack and drew the colt's grip into his palm. The old leather handle bore his wife's initials carved beneath the hammer. He traced the letters once before slipping the pistol into its holster, a silent liaison of grief and protection. That afternoon, Abel rode into Dusthollow with Ike at his side, Lily asleep in a cradle slung across the saddle. The town's dusty street lay empty beneath lantern-lit eaves. The general store's windows glowed with Mrs. Caldwell's bustling lantern. Abel tethered his mare. Ike stepped down, boots crunching grit. He pressed a locket beneath his shirt, feeling the map's ridge tremor beneath brass. Inside the store, Mrs. Caldwell sorted sacks of flour and salt pork. She glanced at Abel and Ike, then slipped a wrapped parcel into Ike's hand. Flannel for Lily and needles for mending. Jeb Warren's Graves men scour the flats, she said, eyes soft as candle flame. You'll need all the cover you can muster. Ike nodded, cheeks flushing beneath winter's scape. He offered the locket's chain to her. She touched the worn initials with reverence. Keep this close, she whispered. It's her story's safeguard. Outside, Ike tucked the parcel into his coat as Abel led Lily's cradle along the boardwalk. A trio of riders emerged from sagebrush's edge, black coats and spurs glinting like threats. Graves men, Ike realized, come to claim more than dues. He shrank behind Abel. Lily stirred beneath blanketed warmth. The riders rode past, eyes cold ledger pages. But one lingered, a gaunt face etched in relief. Ike recognized the turncoat's gait from Silverton's court. Seth Calloway, honoree born in justice's light. Calloway tipped his hat. Hold fast, he said. Graves will not cross this line. Then he vanished into drift and dust, hoofbeats fading like broken promises. Ike exhaled, each breath a gift of mercy and margin. That evening, Abel and Ike stoked embers to life. Firelight glowed on Lily's pale face. The cradle's rails caught lantern's halo. Ike mended the blanket's edge, each stitch a mother's prayer, and pressed the locket's map to its wool. Within the sketch's ink lay a cove near Marston's Gulch, a hidden inlet of silver vein. Graves' motive was no debt, but the lust for riches beneath their home. Abel joined Ike by the hearth, placing a tin cup before the boy. You did well, he said, voice soft as breeze through pines. He stooped and wrapped a comforting arm around Ike's shoulders. Ike leaned into the warmth, each ember a foothold against fear. Night settled in lantern's hush. Abel paced the porch with rifle in hand, while Ike whispered lullabies to Lily. The wind rose in mournful chorus, rattling shutters and echoing through corral rails. Ike peered into the dark, eyes wide for hoofbeats. He pressed a journal to his chest, pages rustling like prayers. Each word Daddy wrote, of faith and land, was a blade against despair. Abel returned, snow-dusted coat flaring behind him. He set the Winchester into its rack and drew Ike close. He knelt and touched the locket's brass sheen. We make our stand at dawn, he said. Ike nodded, each heart flutter a drumbeat of resolve. They exchanged no further words. Their pact was soldered in wood and steel. Before sleep claimed them, Jeb Calloway slipped through the door, rifle rested on one arm. He pressed a hand-drawn notice into Abel's palm. Graves holds court at Silverton. Exile or bloodshed by high noon. His eyes glistened with pity and warning. He'll bring guns and writs both. Then he limped back into Pine's embrace. Abel refolded the notice and placed it beside the journal and locket. Ike crawled into the cradle and held Lily close. Fingers curled around her tiny wrist. Abel knelt by the hearth and closed the gate of imagined threats. Lily's breath was soft as lullabies. Ike's tremor eased in sleep's hush. Abel covered them with a blanket, EW's gift, and watched embers fade into promise. Dawn cracked the horizon in pink and frost. Abel and Ike stood at the corral's edge, coat and journal at their sides. Lily lay warm in the cradle, hope's silent witness. Beyond the fence, hoof prints converged on the ridge. Graves' men were coming again. Ike pressed a gloved hand across his mother's initials on the blanket and looked to Abel. Abel placed a locket's chain around Ike's neck, sealed their quiet covenant. In the chill before dawn's reckoning, the homestead held its breath. The valley's dawn would demand courage carved in metal and mercy wrought in love. A rifle's muzzle glinted atop the ridge. Graves' silhouette paused in rising sun, eyes fixed on the cabin below. In that silent stand, Abel lifted his Colt and Ike clutched the locket, an 1876 verdict of blood and bond written across Wyoming's wild plains. A rifle's glint pierced dawn's frost, Graves' men charging Abel's fragile homestead. Snow-dusted corral rails rattled beneath their spurs. Wind carried echoes of vengeance. Isaiah, Ike. Walker pressed Lily's blanket-wrapped form against the cabin's logs, heart hammering beneath his mother's locket. He watched Abel Thorne stride from the barn, Colt in hand, and resolve carved in every line of his weathered face. Graves' lead rider, Brock Dunn, dark cloak flaring, reined at the fence's edge. He spat snow. "Surrender the deed, chest, and blood forfeit yours," he snarled. Behind him, half a dozen rifles glinted, each aimed like a promise of ruin. Abel raised his Colt. "You'll have to take it from cold steel," he said, voice low as canyon ice. He kicked at the snow, embers of Clara's memory stirring beneath his ribs. Each step toward the fence was a vow to protect these orphans, as he once vowed to his lost family. Ike ducked inside the cabin and scooped Lily from the cradle. Her small face was pale beneath lantern's glow. Her breath fluttered like baby birds' wings. He pressed at his chest and slipped the blanket's fringe around them both. EW's initials bold against woven wool. Then he cracked the door and stepped onto the porch, Colt in one hand, locket clasped in the other. Wind scoured the porch. Each plank moaned beneath his boots. Ike met Dunn's glare without flinch. His voice was a trembling steel. "She's mine to protect." He raised a locket, silver catching dawn's first light. Within its shell, his mother's letter lay folded, a final confession of Blackwell's lies and Graves' threats. Abel covered Ike's back. Colt leveled at the riders. He thought of Clara's lullaby echoing in wildflower fields, of fever's hush silencing their home. Now he stood sentinel for new life, each heartbeat hammered in wood and steel. He exhaled, steady as embers. Dunn's grin was cruel as wind-lashed pines. "Show me proof," he spat, "or we burn this place to ash." He signaled his men. Rifles barked. Frost shattered like glass around Abel's boots. Clara's lullaby, once soft comfort, rose in Ike's memory like a call to arms. He pried the locket's clasp and pressed the letter between cold palms. He rushed forward, Colt forgotten. His small voice rang clear as chapel bell. "Read her words." Dunn's men hesitated. The letter shone like sacred parable. Ike unfolded it, voice steady despite fear. "Elizabeth Walker named Abel Thorne guardian of her claim. Mine and Lily's, should fate steal her life." He held the letter high, each word a beacon in winter's gloom. Reverend Ezra Cole and Mrs. Lydia Jenkins appeared at the cabin's corner, rifles at rest but eyes alight with conviction. Reverend Cole cried, "By sacred trust and county seal, this deed stands under Abel's guardianship." Mrs. Jenkins pressed forward, laying a hand on Abel's shoulder, townsfolk solidarity woven in her nod. Behind them, Jeb Calloway emerged with miners and ranchers, shovels and pitchforks raised in defiance of Graves' greed. Frost-crusted rails shuddered beneath their weight. Ike's heart surged as thawed hope warmed his chest. Brock Dunn's eyes darted from letter to rising crowd. "You'll pay for this," he snarled, but his rifle wavered. Graves' men glanced at one another, rifles lowered like broken promises. Abel stepped forward, Colt resting at his side. "Leave now," he said. "This home stands under truth's shield." The riders backed away, each hoofbeat a shriek of retreat in the hush. Ike clutched Lily's blanket, tears thawing in his lashes. He pressed a locket to his chest, Mother's voice echoing in silent grief and triumph. As Graves' men vanished into pines, Abbott Marr, former lawman turned rancher, appeared from the ridge, rifle slung low. He nodded to Abel. "I hear Graves writ is no mere threat," he said. "He's hired counsel for a final court in Silverton." His gaze swept past the corral. "You'll need more than steel to hold him." Abel exhaled, chest heavy with storm's calm. "Then we face him there," he said. He turned to Ike. "You ready?" Ike nodded, voice small but sure. "We stand together." He lifted Lily, blankets fringe brushing Marston's gulch map, tucked in a locket. Each foldable held Legacy's truth. Each heartbeat a step toward reclaiming what was lost. Night fell with Lantern's lullaby. Abel, Ike, and Marshall Mars sat by the hearth, tendering stew of pemmican and turnip. Mrs. Jenkins pressed fresh biscuits into Ike's small hands. Reverend Cole blessed the bowls. Abel held the locket's map open on his knee, inked lines pointing to hidden silver under Marston's ridge. He traced the path for Ike. "This vein's your mother's legacy," he said. Ike placed Lily's blanket over the map, each thread weaving past and future. Abel rested his hand atop Ike's. The boy nodded, eyes bright with promise. Dawn's sky was pale as eggshell when Abel loaded his mare. Ike strapped Lily's cradle to the saddle. Marshall Mars strapped Powderhorn to his belt. They rode from the homestead, Lantern's glow fading behind them. Each hoofbeat carried them towards Silverton. Last Stand's promise riding on spur steel. At the corral gate, Ike paused, hand on the locket's clasp. He peered back at the cabin, smoke curling into Dawn's hush. Abel caught his gaze and offered a gentle nod. Silent vow that home would rise again, stone by stone, dawn by dawn, on the trail to Silverton. The wind scoured sagebrush and drifted snow across their path. Graves' court writ lay folded in Abel's pocket, each line a summons to final reckoning. Ike fingered the locket's map, recalling his mother's hope for this land. Lily slept beneath blankets' wings, innocence guarded by loss's echo. Blackwell silhouette crowned the ridge. Graves himself astride a black mare, cloak flaring like a storm cloud. He reined at the trail's fork, grudge carved in every shadow of his face. He raised his pistol. Abel drew his Colt. Ike lifted the locket's brass to the sky, each glittering word a beacon of truth. Between two ridges, rifles leveled under winter's pale dawn. Graves' final ambush poised to fracture Dawn's promise. Ike pressed Lily's blanket tight. Abel's Colt spoke in silent thunder, and Silverton's trial hung on edge of steel and Story's last breath. Graves' pistol flared in Dawn's hush, his shadow looming over Abel's final stand. Snow-dusted sagebrush shuddered beneath rifle command as Isaiah, Ike. Walker pressed Lily's bundled form into his coat. Heart hammering like a trapped stag, he ducked behind a cedar rail and watched Abel Thorne pivot, Colt drawn, each breath a vow against the night's terror. Abel Thorne knelt beside Ike's shoulder, rifle leveled at the ridge. White steam curled from his lips, each exhale a prayer to Clara's memory. He recalled fever's grim hush taking her from his arms. Now he would not lose these children. He fired a warning shot over Graves' men. Steel bark hammered truth into winter's gray. Ike slid Lily behind the stern rail of the corral, blankets fringe wedged between boards. He tugged at the locket, his mother's letter pressed beneath its brass shell. He fumbled the clasp and pressed the paper to his chest. Elizabeth Walker trusts Abel Thorne with our claim, and our children. He raised the letter above the rail, voice a trembling bell. Read her words. A hush fell like snowfall. Graves' men faltered, rifles trembling as the letter caught Dawn's glow. Then Marshall Mars' horn split the air. From Pine Slab Barn came Jeb Calloway, rifle in hand. Behind him rode miners and ranchers, Mrs. Lydia Jenkins and Reverend Ezra Cole among them, each a sentinel of justice. Hoofbeats thundered as Dusthollows will coalesce in sanguine solidarity. Abel exhaled and steadied Ike's hand on the fence. "You did it," he whispered. Ike gave a small nod, Lily's soft coo a hymn of hope. Together, they watched Graves' men melt into Ridge's shadow, defeated by truth's silver blade. That afternoon, Silver sunlight sifted through courtroom windows as Abel and Ike entered Silverton's hall. Snow clung to their coats. Ike carried Lily, locket, and letter folded within his jacket. Abel's coat lay on the bench beside the original deed chest, iron-bound proof of the Walker claim. Judge Callahan rose as Abel laid out the papers. Ike stepped forward, voice brittle but clear. My mother named him guardian. He keeps our promise. He opened the letter for all to see. Reverend Cole and Mrs. Jenkins stood behind him, witness to Mercy's return. Graves sat to one side, ledger and threats scattered like lies on the floor. Judge Callahan rapped his gavel. Black's claim is dismissed. Abel Thorne holds guardianship, and the silver vein belongs to the Walker heirs. He stamped the ruling, ink seal shining like aspens in cold light. Let no man disturb this verdict. Outside, snow-dusted square erupted in muted cheer. Ike slipped Lily into Abel's arms. He wrapped her in the blanket, EW's final gift, now a banner of freedom. The crowd pressed forward, miners brandishing pickaxes like banner hearts, ranchers tipping hats in salute, Mrs. Jenkins and Reverend Cole guiding the praise with solemn grace. Even Seth Calloway offered a nod of respect. Spurs echoing hope. Abel rested a hand on Ike's shoulder, silent communion of loss and promise. Ike pressed a locket into Abel's palm, map's corner and mother's script worn into brass. Abel tucked it into his shirt pocket. Each beat a pulse of redemption. That evening, the homestead glowed beneath lanterns' embrace. Neighbors converged with beams and nails for barn raising. Timber squared and rafters roped with rawhide lash. Ike and Lily stood on the porch, each swing of hammer and echo of laughter weaving them into Dusthollow's renewed tapestry. Ike retrieved the journal from its shelf, last entry scribbled in hope. Our home is ours. He handed it to Abel, who opened the blank pages now ready for tomorrow's stories. Ike pressed a finger to the locket's faint inscription, Marston's Gulch, now sealed by court's decree. Abel laid a hand on Ike's head and guided him to help Mrs. Jenkins pass out biscuits. Lily toddled in woolen coat, bright eyes dancing in embers glow. Neighbors paused their work to murmur blessings. Evidence that community could rise from dust's ashes. Days folded into weeks. The barn's loft held winter's fodder. Spring's thaw coaxed green from sagebrush and clover from cracks in timber floor. Abel guided Ike in planting carrots and turnips, each furrow a tether to the land his mother loved. Lily trailed behind, straw hat oversized and grin bright as morning's first light. At dusk, they gathered by the corral fence. Abel rested his rifle on the rail and drew Ike close. Ike lifted his arm, the blanket's fringe tracing promise around Lily's shoulders. Abel covered them both with a blanket. Its wool warmed by memory and mercy. One autumn eve, under rosewood sky, Ike and Abel climbed the ridge to Marston's Gulch, silver-washed hills glimmering in twilight's hush. Ike held the key to the deed chest. Abel bore the chest itself. They knelt at the hidden enclosure carved into stone. Ike turned the key. Hinges creaked. Inside lay the original deed, its county seal unbroken. Abel lifted Ike into his lap and opened the deed to the night. Ike pressed his palm to the seal and traced its edge, each indent a testament to his mother's courage. Abel drew Lily close, her small face nuzzling his coat. He pressed a welded locket against his chest, a father's vow held in brass and blood. Back at the cabin, the fireplace crackled with cedar logs. Lanterns glowed like captured fireflies. Pine-scented air wrapped around straw mattresses and rough-hewn benches. Ike scrawled the final journal entry. We stand free, each letter a stone in life's enduring wall. He pressed the journal's cover closed and slid it into the locket's brass clasp. Memory safe within memory. Abel filled 2 tin cups with hot chicory coffee, one for himself, one for Ike. He offered the cup. Ike accepted, warmth blooming in both their chests. Abel settled the cup beside Lily's straw pallet. Each gesture a sacrament of chosen family and reclaimed land. As dawn slipped across Dusthollow's snow-dusted plains, Abel and Ike stood on the porch, new fences spanning ridge and gulch. The ranch's lights glowed like beacons of hope. Horses nickered in early sunlight. Ike pressed his palm to the locket's map, now folded into his shirt, and turned to Abel. Abel tipped his hat, smile soft as wind through aspen. He clasped Ike's shoulder, silent promise that this dawn would never fade. Ike's sister cooed from the cradle. Blossom petals of wild clover spilled across the threshold. In the hush of valley and pine, the walk to the corral was a testament. Redemption carved in silver seams, freedom forged in brass and blood, and love found the orphan's cradle, an infertile widower's final dawn. Dusthollow exhaled its blessing, community, and chosen family rising beneath Wyoming's boundless sky.